Welcome to the live stream, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host today, Bumpy McSquigums. I'm joined by a Cupogoodness and a Tiny Disaster. And here we are. Hi, everybody. And it is our discussion today, game industry discussion, VR, a look at the past, the present, and the future. So how are you two doing on this day?
Daylight savings. Daylight savings is still like messing with me, and that's annoying. I don't know. Like I've just had low energy the last few days. I don't know.
We may be headed towards the end of that. I know your Congress just passed the bill to end it next year.
Wait, really?
I know a lot of Canadian provinces have been waiting to still stay in sync with American neighbors. So this.
Hi, Missy. Thanks for joining us today.
Really, that's the thing. That's great.
I mean, it's so it hurts so bad to have to go through it. The process as you get older, it actually hurts more to me. And
it's never bothered me. But I am a robot, so it's totally fine. I get it. It kills my wife. It kills my wife.
As Homer Simpson said, the only time I've been early to work is when I didn't know about daylight savings. Lousy farmers. So that was his take on the situation. I'm not sure. I don't know if the farmers even had anything to do with it. Probably though. Like that was probably
not.
Yeah.
Apparently that's some big myth thing. I have no idea why.
That's where I learned my history is The Simpsons. So anyway, for me, it is so weird that you guys are online at this time. Here it is still winter time, and I'm the same as Cup. I feel that way in like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's weird because Europe is 2 weeks later than us in the spring and 2 weeks earlier than us in the fall, I think. And I don't know
if I knew that, but yeah, I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah,
everyone should just be done. I cannot calculate this many time zones.
Yeah, the Colonel has taught us that over the years. So
yeah, working internationally with folks, you learn a lot, and you learn that there's so much to learn, as TD was pointing out.
Oh, that's fine.
Virtual insanity, huh? Virtual reality, VR,
reality and insanity. Now I do have notes from one of our very own Senor King Isaac Klinkser. I got a hold of him, and he's got a couple of paragraphs to go through. So when
great,
whenever we're ready to do that, I will dive in.
He is Indie Bros VR person, and it's kind of specialist. And I don't know if he has a Quest 2 at this point or not. I know he's got his PC VR. I don't know what else he's got right now.
HTC Vive.
Oh, he's got the Valve one then. Okay. That makes sense. But we'll get into talking about, I guess, all the various platforms right now for VR. And I guess, the players at work and all that kind of stuff. Tiny Disaster was the one who posited this as a topic to discuss because there is a subsection of indie developers doing VR games right now, and it's kind of worth going over. Indie Brothers has helped VR devs in the past on various games, including some really fun ones and some really kind of creative designs for the platform. So it's an interesting topic to talk about, and it's kind of relevant right now because of Quest 2 and Meta or Metastore driving sales way up for VR games, or at least those that can find their way onto that platform and that storefront.
It feels like we're on the cusp of VR is finally going to become a thing, but it's felt like we've been on that cusp for years now. We just got to reach that breaking point, tipping point where more people have it, more people have friends who are playing games, so they have that, I want to play this with. So it feels like we're almost there, but
the big difference now is that there's numbers backing it versus before where we're just it's just not going that well. Like we saw VR releases, we put forth great campaigns, got great interaction with the limited amount of VR content creators, VR websites, but still there were, we were getting a high percentage of conversion, right? Because they were hungry for content and they were establishing themselves. But in the end, it was just really hard to pull the sales out of those situations in the big numbers that you'd expect, on PC as well.
Yeah.
And so it was super rare for a VR game to go big on sales basically until fairly recently. And I think I wouldn't say super rare, but I would say rare. And now we're in a place where it's more viable suddenly to be a VR developer. If you're a VR developer and you've been that way for years and you have, products in the pipeline, you've kind of lasted long enough to see some good, maybe if not good returns yet, then some good prospects and good signs ahead.
Yeah, I believe the latest one that we worked on was Deadness. It was a horror game that was VR.
Yeah, and that's something we want to talk about
month.
today is like the games that work well, the genres, the game types that work well in VR that we've seen so far based on like anecdotally and via sales and data. Interesting to cover that as well because horror is definitely one of the genres, immersive, right? That you'd expect to see
with VR,
done well in VR, and one of the some of these categories tied together. So like Resident Evil 4 VR is a combination, right, of a well-known IP and a horror IP or a horror game kind of coming together. That's checking two boxes for VR, so to speak, because one of the successes on VR, no surprise, just like on mobile, is well-known licensed games, IPs, big names, and or really recognizable concepts or titles. Like we said, table tennis is one of the top VR sellers right now. So like just like a simple concept that works well in that situation.
So where would you like to start today, A Tiny Disaster?
Well, I was going to lead in with kind of what we're talking about just now with horror games, and I know that's something we've talked a bit about on the like in our chat before in terms of just generally gaming. So I wanted to ask you guys like, what is your experience personally with VR so far, and then what are you most interested in VR in the future? Like, do you want to be playing horror games where it feels like you're really there? Is there something else that interests you? Is it not really your thing? So where are you personally with it?
Bumpy, do you want to start? Or you want me to go?
Sure, because mine is non-existent. I got to do a little bit of VR in like theme parks, which is not really the same thing. And I'm very prone to motion sickness, so I've been very keeping my eye on it, but expecting it to take a while before it's gonna, first off, be something that's viable, and secondly, hopefully they somehow solve the motion sick problem because I will get sick really quickly. I don't do well on boats, and I did not do well in any kind of VR thing. So, as far as what I'd like to see, I think what a lot of people are having fun with that I've seen, various things that I have watched, kind of, literally first person shooters, because, you're in there, you're actually controlling the gun. It's like paintball, laser tag, all that, but you're in VR, and then you have the video game elements with it. So I think that would probably be pretty fun. I'd like maybe kind of an action game, something where you control like how your weapon swings and stuff like that. To me, that would be a lot more enjoyable and fun. But of course, you're going to be walking into walls and stuff. I don't know how the controls are going to work with that. You always kind of hope for that, like Ready Player One thing, where you have the like little thing that locks you in place and you can run around and you don't like crash into walls. And I think they actually have something like that, like a track mat that you walk on that holds you in place. I think I've seen something like that existing. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm looking forward to in the future, and kind of the stuff that probably interests me more. And of course, sports games like table tennis, ping pong, stuff like that, I think would be a lot of fun too. So.
Yeah, I fall in the same category as you, Bumpy, in that I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have that, like a high percentage of people that are probably like, I'm not really ready to enter or re-enter VR until I'm kind of assured that I'm not going to have motion sickness issues. That is something that has plagued VR since like, I don't know, a decade ago, and has still been a problem up until recently. A lot of the things that I've heard about the solving of the issue is working with the constraints. So not making you move like a lot. Like trying to keep you stationary, as in not having you have to move your feet, is something that's really important in a lot of games apparently now with VR. I'm someone who I think could take to it, but I'm a fan, Star Trek fan here. Love the idea of the holodeck. Love the idea of augmented reality. So the idea that you put your phone in the middle of a room and suddenly things start appearing in the room and you're interacting with those things, as opposed to having to put on a headset and immersing yourself in like a world. It's not quite the same, of course. It depends on how good the augmented reality can get to. The very basic augmented reality is like Pokemon Go, right? But like down the line, they could be doing way more intense stuff that where it's actually like, again, coming out and like hologramming in your room, or actually changing your room completely, that kind of stuff. So that's fascinating to me. I don't know that the technology is ever going to reach that far, but it would be really in my lifetime, but that would be cool. But like from like the VR perspective, yeah, I definitely feel a lot of the growing pains of VR has been like a reason why I personally haven't stepped in, like strapping a huge thing onto your face, having motion sickness, has never been something that has like been like and motion sickness is a lot of times it's a personal thing for each individual, right? And it's just become a perception of VR. Like again, I fall into the category as with Bumpy, and I feel like there's a lot of people that probably fall into that category as well, and it's just avoiding VR because of that. So off of just that point alone. So working on VR games, like it was cool to we worked on a game where it was a 2-player versus game where one player was the sort of on PC and not VR, and he was controlling kind of the map and was throwing enemies at the person who was on the battlefield in VR. And that was kind of a cool idea. That was just like an early VR game, kind of concept that was like, let's play with. It was like some of these indies are really wanting to play with different ways that they could make this work between multiple platforms and stuff. And then trying to think of some other things, like obviously you guys mentioned horror games. Obviously, I know well about Beat Saber and how that's basically the killer app for, any VR platforms that carry that game. You see them, you think about like platforms that are like emerging platforms that really haven't made it yet, but Beat Saber is in like Super Bowl commercials and things of that sort. So it's like that's where that game is at. And it's entirely a VR game. It hasn't made itself, I don't think Beat Saber is available on any platform except for VR platforms. So
how it would
that's like, exactly. It would just be like a rhythm game that would just be using your mouse or controller. I don't know. Yeah.
So or something. Yeah.
Not nearly as fun, right, as versus the actual concept in VR. So, but yeah, so it's not something that I've spent like a ton of time in, like personally, as Bumpy points out. That's why we actually hired our Indie Bros specialist, because it was like, oh, well, we don't want to just take on VR projects without someone who's able to actually strap on the headset and try these games, demo these games, and be able to provide direct feedback in addition to, what we can see from the trailers, see from the, store page stuff. So that's kind of like our approach with it. But yeah, like other than that, I'm kind of a little more buoyed by the fact that this, the current situation, like it's like I might actually look into it a little bit more. Obviously, like it's like with COVID going, I mean, things are changing rapidly, but like the last couple of years, you don't even get to go to public shows where VR stuff is set up, because you're not even going to put on a headset, because that's just not going to, it's like an option or something that you're going to do. That's going to happen in most cases over the last couple of years. So that's where VR was happening a lot over the last like 5 to 10 years, was in like the shows like PAX, GDC, other things, like especially like at GDC and like developers conference, where they were trying to prove their concepts to other developers and publishers, of course, and like, platform holders. So it's something that is I've seen as this, what I would have presumed would be a stagnating corner of the indie and other areas of the games industry, but major players like I guess Facebook, when they bought Oculus. I'm trying to do my history here, right, and remember all what happened here and stuff, but my memory serves, Facebook bought Oculus. And they've been working with, that was years ago, at least
2014. I've got a timeline up.
Thank you. It was, I was going to say at least 5 years ago, but it was actually more like 8 years ago. And that's how long it's taken them to get to this point now, where now the Meta Store, which is owned by Facebook, of course, and the Quest 2, which is like the latest iteration of the Oculus, I believe, formula. And that is a standalone. It doesn't require a PC, or like for PlayStation VR, it doesn't require your PlayStation, etc. So these are major breakthroughs that are happening now. It's taken a while. I had thought at one point, if you asked me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that I would be like, it's just really stagnant, and I would not encourage people to go down this route. But now it's different. I feel like it's not, now is like the gold rush time. If you have a high quality VR game, like, and what I mean by high quality is quality is probably the wrong word. It doesn't necessarily have to be high quality. It has to check the right boxes to get through, the evaluation of the Metastore. And then when you're on the Metastore, it's about how interesting your concept is to there versus, because some games are like huge outliers with sales on the Metastore. Others are like, oh, these are just doing well, but not incredibly well. But well is still obviously really good. So, but we can talk about that as we get into this. I don't want to just keep talking about my notes when it makes sense to maybe talk about them later.
So for me, we actually bought an Oculus, like the original Quest. I don't know. We bought one in March 2020. Of like, we're going to be stuck inside for a while. It was a hit with the family, so we now have a Rift and that original Quest. I think my mom has a Quest. So I've played a lot of Beat Saber, and that's about it. My husband has played Alex, and he does really enjoy the first-person shooter, being able to like reload his weapon before he gets to like fight zombies as they're coming towards him. He thinks it's fantastic. We don't use it that much anymore, but I hope there's going to be more games that kind of come out and grab my attention. Missy mentioned Job Simulator. Looks like a lot of fun on that. So I kind of want to check that out now. But
that's a great point. It's relating to me thinking that it's stagnating, is that there needs to be a steadier flow of games, and good games that like catch, whoever's eye, like who has the VR sets, because otherwise they get that Christmas toy. No, my thing's Christmas, whatever you do for your big gifts. But the Christmas toy for me is something that you get, you're like, this is amazing. And then a couple months later, it's just not even in use anymore by you and stuff. You see that a lot of times. I definitely identify that with my kids as well. So it's one of those things where it's like, can you keep it active enough through the releases? Actually, Xbox and Xbox Game Pass is somewhere for me. I'm not going to turn on Xbox unless there's a game that I feel like, I really want to play via the Game Pass kind of situation. So.
Not lost my train of thought. Where was I headed with that? Mostly just as someone who's not a first-person shooter player ever on a PC, I have zero interest in those kind of games, which does seem to be a lot where a lot of the big budgets are going right now. And I get why that's very cool in VR, just not for me. So,
I think if you
my overcooked friends and I and stuff are looking at playing Cookout or something like that on VR. So, as things are coming up, I'm hoping it'll become more of a part of my routine. But
what I'm getting from like just seeing what sells well is that there are different, obviously just like other platforms, there are different subsets of, genres that perform well. First person shooter being one of them, but not the only one. There are other ones as well. So a couple of the ones I saw that were like, whoa, outliers selling really, really, really well. Is let's see, the Room, which was a PC mystery adventure where you would like kind of explore mansions and things of that sort and investigate for clues and such. So apparently that's doing super well on the Metastore and via the Quest games and stuff. That it's called the Room Room something VR, maybe 4. No, the Room VR: A Dark Matter.
It's also like Pump's favorite movie.
Yeah, mock. Let's see here. What was the? Yeah, so the developer. What my train of thought was lost there for Bumpy's good joke. But the Room VR is a independently developed game, I believe, because it's by. If you go to the Steam store page, let's see. There it is. Yeah, it's produced or published and developed by Fireproof Games. So this is a series that existed before VR, obviously, and did well on PC. If you click on their games lists by just clicking on their thing, let's see, browse. There we go. Yeah, like The Room 2 has 14,000, almost 14,000 reviews on Steam. So that's like that's a lot. So that's like an established IP making the leap over to VR. That like an established IP that makes sense to make the leap over to VR. There was another game that stood out to me called, I believe, Demio. Let's see if I got that right. Yeah, Demio, Demeo. That's got 1,000 positive reviews right now on Steam by Resolution Games. Kind of like a tabletop game, similar to the game Bumpy and I played recently on our stream on Friday, I think. Top-down dungeon crawler with some table, that kind of those tabletop elements of playing together like Dungeons and Dragons online, so to speak. And if you look, there's actually like an image on the Steam store page of like people playing together with their headsets on at the same place, which is kind of weird. But I think if you can do it, I'm pretty sure you can. It's online multiplayer as well. So yeah, it's online co-op and cross-platform multiplayer. I guess they're working on a PC version as well. So anyway, that one kind of stood out to me because I didn't really think about how a turn-based RPG would necessarily be a winner in the VR platform, but it does kind of make sense when you think about it. I don't know if that means that there's a big wide open space for those kinds of games, or if this is just an interesting outlier, because I don't see a lot of other these kind of like strategy or RPG games being VR hits.
Yeah, so as we transition over to talking about like what all of this means for developers and what you should be thinking about in terms of, do you want to make a VR game, or do you want to port your game over to VR if it's something that might make sense there? Like there is still room to experiment and to build a fan base for your genre from the ground up in VR if you find creative solutions to things that are usually done with a mouse and keyboard, et cetera, et cetera. Like a lot of what you're seeing right now in VR are just like ports of games. Skyrim VR is a huge thing. A lot of the games that are doing really well started out as PC games, and I was like, oh, this is way cooler when I get to actually feel like I'm there. One thing I did want to mention before we talk about our own personal experiences with it, I also get a lot of motion sickness. And one of the big things I'd heard before getting a system myself is that women were very much not testing the system. So motion sickness is a much more common thing in female players for VR. I haven't had an issue with it, even though I cannot do anything in a car without getting sick. There's only been like a couple of moments in the hours I've played, so it might not be as bad as you guys think it is. But it is something that's getting better with a progressive system.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like, I think that, again, that it's a perception caused by the early concepts that we ran into that we knew weren't optimized. We learned eventually that were not optimized, and that there was a ways to go with the technology to reach a point where people were feeling better about it. It does seem that as more people flock to this, latest iteration, these latest iterations of VR that are out there, the perception will lessen, if not entirely dispel about it, because you're like, oh, well, I guess if this many people are using it, then it's possible when I throw it on, I'm not just going to feel like running to the toilet immediately and praying to the porcelain
It'd be
gods.
so nice if there was more opportunities to test that before people could buy it. Like it really is just kind of a luck of the draw, and then you have to go through the hassle of returning it online and whatever. But
it's a good point. If they could offer you some sort of test that did not require you to have a headset, that would be really nice. But I don't know how they could do that. So
one of the things
you're just having more. Go ahead.
One of the things you mentioned was trying to keep people stationary, less movement while you're in VR. And again, my experiences with it is basically, I lived in Florida. I was going to amusement parks and they had VR there, which was all about moving you around and jostling you. So I might actually not get motion sick because, again, that's not the kind of the whole goal and plan for having a VR headset now. The only other concern I have is glasses. Does it fit around so you can see with glasses? If not, how far away is it?
My brother-in-law plays with glasses. It's just a matter of like positioning it on your head.
Oh, that's good.
Comfortably.
Yeah, 10 years ago, there was basically running, meme videos of people riding VR roller coasters and just falling over in their chairs. So this was like a bad perception, a bad look at the time for VR. And it's clear that things have changed from there. Obviously, I think people learn to like don't put people in motion so much if you can avoid it, or at least like fast motion that they're not used to in that state. Like, and a lot of the early VR concepts were not really adhering to that at all, and so you were getting these unfortunate results where people would record other people just like falling over, standing up, and things like that.
Some of that I think was the initial like, oh, look what this can do. Because like, yes, a roller coaster, it feels cool, but like the reality is, even if you don't feel sick, you don't feel movement. So like, it looks neat that you can do it, but the actual reality of it isn't that much fun.
There's no wind. There's none of the stuff that you would expect. But I know I've seen things like people are walking in VR like on a beam, and then they're like, somebody pushes them off. They think they're gonna fall and die, and really they're like a half an inch off the ground, right? But in the VR, they're on like the edge of a building.
Oh yeah. So there's anxiety with that too.
It's your mind trying to compensate for what it's seeing and what would happen if this happens. And then you take that step and the ground's not there right away, and all of a sudden, boom, you have that panic. So some interesting.
So those levels of immersion is what makes me curious of like why people feel like horror in VR is a good time.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I think I'm actually gonna die. Fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like that comes from people that are just already just deeply in love with that genre. It's just like people who listen to metal rock, like with screaming, singers and stuff like that. It's probably an acquired taste and one that we're not interested in having. In horror, not for metal. I love metal. Just so you know. Just so we're clear.
Missy said House Flipper VR might be awesome. I could see that being really cool. It's like all of the little like mundane tasks that are boring in real life, but video games make fun. That could be a lot of fun in VR.
Some people like being scared. I don't like being scared. I think that's a horror thing. So like, right, like they just like oh, I like the concept of having my anxiety spike. I'm like, I'm cool with that.
I don't really.
And you can see how
scared,
VR would enhance it.
Well, like not scared though, but like like they're just trying to get you
people
to
legitimately either they're
take an inhale.
They either super overreact, which they 100% do, or they really legitimately get scared all the time. And I see it, I'm like, how?
Well,
this is
or
ridiculous.
Ultimately, I guess it's not even scared for me. It's just like, oh, you tried to startle me. You tried to catch me with an audio thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Jump
like
scares
it's like
you're not getting scared.
I'll admit this. My car does not lower its volume automatically if I turn it off, and if I'm rocking to something and I forget and I come back in like an hour later, that's the biggest jump scare I have in my life right now. Is like having the guitar come in at like volume 60. And me just going like, oh my god, and just like, going for the volume immediately and stuff like that. And to be honest, like that's not necessarily scaring me. It's just like this, like it's so loud, it just startles me.
Well,
right?
It's something
like,
that's not supposed to be there. Something that's not supposed to be happening. Something unexpected.
Horror.
So again, it's not like a lot of people.
Something unexpected is comedy too.
A lot of people get with horror games. It's more they're terrorized by what they see, and they're like freaked out, like, oh my god, what is it? It's gonna like it's more terror than scared. I don't know.
Scared I do like horror. That's like horror is something that shouldn't exist but does. I love that concept. Yeah, that's really good.
Thought about House Flipper because there's a House Flipper 2 coming out in the near future, and they're still working on some DLC. So yeah, and I think they are working on House Flipper VR, or they already have it out.
So like VR could amplify horror. I could see it amplifying like simulation games where like Farm Simulator VR, truck driving, like it's all a little more immersive. So I could see that being a genre.
I specifically think about that for like Super Hot VR, which is a like turn-based or slow motion shooter where you are tactically trying to decide what you want to do next as the bullet is in the middle of the air. So, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like a time control.
So you're walking around the room. That makes a lot of sense in VR. You know what I mean? To me, Arizona Sunshine, I believe, is a top seller. That's a VR zombie shooter. Onward, military sim shooter. So yeah, a lot of shooters for sure are doing well. And then the licensed games. The Walking Dead has a really high-selling game on VR, and Five Nights at Freddy's has a really high-selling game on VR right now. In addition to Resident Evil 4 VR, which I mentioned before. So obviously, if you can get your hands on a like a dormant IP that you feel like would do really well on VR, and people know it, that's definitely one approach as an indie developer you could go about. But short of that, you're looking for like concepts that really wow people.
Is there a Resident Evil 4 VR? Where is that at? Because I've never heard or seen that. I know 7 came out.
Let me see. Let me confirm I'm not crazy here.
Yeah, because you keep saying, I'm like, did they release that just randomly for some reason?
Yeah, Resident Evil 4 and Oculus Quest 2 is out by now, and that is, I'm not getting a date on that, but that's top of Google. It was October 20th of last year, September 27th. I'm seeing some gameplay trailers and stuff for 60 minutes of gameplay on IGN, October 20th.
Okay, well, is it not on Steam?
It's on Quest 2 and Meta only, maybe, if it's not on Steam.
Oh, okay.
But its sales are so stinking high on Meta, and Meta sales are, the way I'm seeing them, it's pretty comparable. Like, so that one is like standing out from a class of games that are already selling pretty well, and that one's on a graph that's like pretty far out. Now, Beat Saber's out in some, you know, it's like Beat Saber is like the Minecraft or I guess Among Us or whatever, where it's like it's just an outlier. It's so far out on this graph. But Resident Evil 4 is standing out from the crowd, basically, at this point on that graph. And this is sales on the storefront. And what I'm getting at, these are like thousands and thousands and thousands of sales. So it's not, it is comparable to Steam. It's not like it's like a lower PC store versus Steam or anything like that.
You keep saying the Meta Store. Is that called something else? I haven't seen that. Google is not giving me anything.
Let me see what it's Quest 2 store. My reference for that is that VR article we were reading on newsletter.gamediscover.co. Let me see if I can quickly find where they keep mentioning that.
It's weird that Resident Evil 7 is not showing up as VR, even though I 100% know it is because I've seen people playing it in VR. It's really weird.
Is it on PC and VR compatible? Maybe like on Steam. I can't remember. Maybe that's like. But it's not like listed anywhere specifically.
It, so maybe there's a specific version of it, and it's just not showing for me. It's not an important thing, but still, it's just weird that usually they could be played with PC or VR's optional. Usually it shows that, and I don't know why I don't see it. And I'm 100% sure because I remember watching someone playing it and going, well. And they were complaining a little bit about the movement because you would move in chunks or you would turn in chunks or something. I don't know. But yeah, doesn't say that. And it was a big thing. It was one of the first like big titles that launched alongside itself as a non-VR game along with the VR game.
So the Meta VR, formerly Oculus Store. So it's a recent change. It's basically the Oculus Store is what we're talking about when I say Meta, and that's just the term that I've seen come up like about a half, or more than a dozen times on those. He's got about 3 or 4 articles in the last 2 months on the subject because of how big of an explosion they're seeing. Sales for games on the Oculus, formerly Oculus storefront. So if you can get on the Oculus storefront and you're on Quest 2, and other devices as well, like Valve's, you're putting yourself in very good position to perform well. And like, even if you don't perform amazingly, like some of the games that we've mentioned that are like taking off, you will perform well enough like to expectations or what maybe even beyond what your expectations are for sales, like which has just not been the case until now, like until 2022. You know what I mean? Like this, like maybe the end of 2021 is when people started finding this taking off. So that's a great play. Again, if you're a VR developer or like a hardcore VR developer and that's what your focus is, it's a sunny day today. You know what I mean? Versus what it was a couple of years ago. But that said, ships sail, right? And who knows how long this is going to last. The platform, now that they're making money, this is the gold rush period. People will rush towards this. All developers will put their, kind of chips in for this, and the storefront will bloat. It will, it'll reach its capacity, so to speak, in terms of discoverability. And sales will slow down per game over time. But that's not going to happen right away because this is a new I feel like this is like still an emergent platform. It's not like it's just like a new storefront on PC that is just doing really well because there's already a ton of PC games out there, right? Like that's not quite true about VR. So
according to Missy, I would agree with that. No Man's Sky in VR does sound like it would be fun, and in the Meta store is where Resident Evil 4 is. 7 is PSVR only, and the Quest 2 only has its own. It doesn't play every game because it's its own like operating system, so it has its
Yeah.
own specific store that you have to buy games for it. So if you own it like something else on, most of the things you can connect to your PC. Obviously, you can't connect the PlayStation VR to it, but the other headsets you were all able to connect to your PC, and then you could actually then go and you could play with any of your headsets, any of the games you have on PC. But you can't do that now with the Quest 2, and the Quest 2 doesn't have any wires. Is that right? Like it's a standalone, like it attached to your head, and that's it.
Correct. Yeah, it's just a standalone device that you just hook up, and you don't have to have it connected to any sort of other platform, like for PlayStation VR. Obviously, the PlayStation for PC, most of the other VRs have hooked up to PC or mobile phone devices.
All right, you guys.
That's why I was getting muddled because like I have the Oculus store, but it's not showing me Quest 2 games. But like with my Quest or the Rift, I could play my Steam games that I like VR games that I have there, but now I can't with the new one.
So you're visually not able to see the Quest 2 games is what you're saying when you don't have the actual Quest 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe they're moving away from that with the Quest 2.
That's an interesting point. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, I found the Meta Quest store on my browser, but the program I have for my Oculus feels different.
Yeah, I need to look at the data because I'm not sure if they're just giving me data on the Meta Store or if they're giving me data on the Meta Store plus Quest 2. Like, as in, like, these are coming purely from Quest 2 owners. Either way, it's a ton of sales. Like, whether it's being contributed to people like TD that have a Quest 1 or whatever, or an Oculus, or that's not the latest edition, that are still buying games at various times. So it's interesting to think about. I'll have to look that up. But it's either way, it's basically, it feels like it's not a false start. Like this is the gold rush period, and that if you are a VR developer and you have projects in the hopper, that you're going to want them to be lined up, and obviously you're going to be trying to get in contact with somebody, within the organization of Oculus, Meta, Facebook, etc., to try to find some content strategist, or developer relation person contact to see if you can get your games on their storefront. And obviously you can do that. You'll be able to hopefully be able to do the legwork to get them on the VR headsets.
Okay, if you guys don't mind, since King Isaac Klinkser was kind enough to give me his notes, I'm gonna go read through that real quick for you guys.
Sounds like good.
It'll take a little bit of time. So, general notes on VR for context. He purchased the original HTC Vive and has been using it for several years on a pretty regular basis on a full AMD platform and Valve's Index controllers. Most recent games he's played are Beat Saber, Free Diver, Triton Down, and A Rogue Escape, all of which he's enjoyed. His main hope for VR is that it will continue to work on the many accessibility issues it has and reinvest into fun games again. The short version of the accessibility problems is that you basically have to be an able-bodied person without significant motion sickness issues or sight problems in order to use it. See, these are two of the issues that we had already kind of discussed. While there have been some helpful additions to curtail these problems, a lot of them still remain. This heavily restricts the potential audience by a significant margin, as well as room scale requirements requiring you to be at an apartment or house that has enough floor space to make it work, something most will not have in great abundance. VR support you should be on Vibe, Steam, and Oculus at the minimum, though you think the referenced articles that we have found expanded upon this better than he ever could, so we'll just dive into those soon. Generally, his biggest frustration with VR is the lack of new games. The last well-received AAA games on VR was Half-Life Alyx. Again, this maybe he hasn't played Resident Evil 4, one of the ones that just came out fairly recently. A game that is almost 2 years old now. It came out on March 23rd, 2020. Both AAA and indie devs seem rather cold to the platform, as even hot-selling titles like Subnautica and Superhot have not had sequels or even updates since they released the games for VR. Top-selling playing games listed hasn't changed much and will regularly have older titles like Beat Saber or the Lab at the top of them. The Lab is 4 years old now. The last year's Steam Awards, the VR category had 3 titles on it that had both mixed reviews ratings and less than 1K reviews each. That's not great. As of this writing, games that do arrive on VR and are well received are often just easy ports from PC consoles, such as Star Wars Squadron games. Meanwhile, Oculus/Meta continues to push the metaverse, a project that is dead on arrival and regularly mocked within the gaming scene while having little to no impact on the general populace despite having Facebook's name behind it. Despite that, a lot of the VR hardware space seems to be devoted to making it work, for whatever reason that is. Apparently, he's not a big fan of Facebook's attempts here. VR in general is going to have a tough hill to climb as long as software development continues to be stagnant. PC, consoles, and mobile continue to get a lot of attention and talk. This is true, while VR sits at the same level as Linux does, barely mentioned and fragmented support. A lot of software support has died, such as YouTube VR, Firefox VR, and similar in the past year. With no replacements waiting to take their place, Nintendo seems to be the only major software company with VR plans, which I didn't even know of, but even that is limited and experimental at best. I'd be lying if he wasn't skeptical of the VR's future, but the trends for it remain bleak, and the metaverse is the camel everyone picks. It's not looking good at all, to be nice about it. So he's thinking that, and this is one of my concerns. He's thinking that since the metaverse is, or at least this is what I'm getting from it, since the metaverse and Facebook and all the thing is, it's its own entity, and it's not willing to play nice with others, essentially, that might be shooting itself in the foot, and people that are going specifically with that company and not, releasing it to all platforms is kind of, harming the overall experience of VR users.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reality check. Like when you think about it, like he's probably giving you a lot of thoughts that have not been, washed in some of this new information that's just coming out this last couple of months.
Or new experiences, yeah.
Correct. And so I see him. I'm not saying he's steeped in the old or anything like that, because you can't get steeped in the new when it's only been a couple of months. It's not like it's just proven out to be the case with but it does sound like what they're getting right now is the Quest 2 hardware and the Metastore just being, I guess, easy enough to access and use. The metaverse, I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know if you have to use it to buy a VR game via the Metastore on Quest 2. I'm not sure if that's the case. It sounds like hopefully that's just an isolated thing, like that's a clunker type of thing. Google had those all the time as they were rising up, individual little projects that everybody was like, this is terrible, and you shouldn't waste your time with it.
That one of the downsides or reasons that the metaverse and all that stuff might be getting a bad name is it does force you into having a Facebook account and having to use that to sign in.
Right. Right, and there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on with Facebook over the last, long just decade here that privacy concerns, not even getting political, just the privacy concerns and other things like that, would slow you down to that company. But they also are I don't know how to describe it. Like, is this a good word? Megalith. Like, they're huge, massive company that regardless of their reputation still has millions upon millions of people that use their services and their networks and et cetera. So it's one of those things. It's kind of like
whether you love it or not, it still makes sense to leverage their other stuff to make it all work.
Well, like I'm on a couple of like subreddits on Reddit that I think are very respectful and very just wholesome, nice subreddits and stuff like that. It wasn't something that I ever thought Reddit's just a trash website, because a lot of other areas in Reddit are really not wholesome and really horrible, and it made me realize, like, I'm like, oh, there are definitely sections of these big monolithic semi nefarious situations and companies and platforms and stuff that still have they're still running okay situations. They have people that are willing to give it a try. It's really complicated. So
when you were first talking about how well Quest 2's been doing and how like the Metastore is killing it, my thoughts were more in line with Isaac's of like, oh, I had not heard anyone actually talk about it in terms of like genuine, excited for this.
It doesn't
And
seem
because
to
of
be.
what Facebook did with like trying to make it seem like their video sharing was the new big thing, it makes me
Right.
instantly suspicious of this.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that it doesn't seem to be anybody's talking about it. The only reason it's turning my head is because the data the data is crazy. Like it's like, wait,
They
this is
faked data
actually
in the past.
that's true. That's true. But I don't necessarily believe that they faked you said views, or I can't remember what it was exactly. I don't think it was sales necessarily.
It was views. They were trying
Right.
to run out YouTube
I'm
and
not
become the
saying
next
that
video thing.
I'm not saying some of the demons that run these big organizations wouldn't go to fake sales or whatever, fake data about it and stuff, but that's another step up to me. Because you're talking about people's livelihoods. Developers, of course, could be like, no, that's not true. Like, like if they saw that and that it was not their sales. Because obviously that's directly related to developers that they don't necessarily have ownership over. They can't tell them to be quiet about that. You know what I mean? Like they can't tell.
If you want to be on our platform, you will do what we say. So technically they could. But
they could, but then you would vastly reduce your variety, right? Like because people don't like to be told what to do or be basically working for a fascist companies like overall. And again, it's a private company. You get to pick your own approaches and stuff. It doesn't necessarily make you fascist, but if people perceive you as such, they're not gonna come around and want to be on your platform in the droves or in the variety and diversity that you probably need and not just want but need at this point. So it's interesting to see. I don't think what Simon Carlos is pulling here is fake data at all. I think that he's someone who's pretty wise to that kind of stuff and would be like, if there's any kind of chances that this isn't true, posting it would make him look foolish. So I take that in mind to some extent. But this world's weird. You're probably I can't tell you that you're 100% wrong. Like it's very likely, TD, that it's possible. That could happen. But it's just
cute. I don't have an actual working theory here.
It just seems like
when you were saying they were.
I would just be like, why? I get why to some extent, but again, if it's still failing, saying that it's working is not going to help anything in the long term, right? Like it's not going to actually fix anything.
But if you tell everybody that this is what everybody's buying, then the hope is that people will actually buy.
But hasn't that been tried before? Is what I'm saying. Like in the
look, essentially,
yes, by Facebook.
You look at Twitch, right? Twitch. Whoever's popular is playing a popular game. Everybody's going to dive in and start playing that popular game. Whether the game's good or bad or indifferent doesn't matter. It's the person's playing it. I can't miss out on this. I have to do this. It's that whole chasing.
There's FOMO for sure, fear of missing out and stuff, but the longevity of a product or a service is not going to be determined on when someone's like, this is amazing, and it's not. The longevity is going to be affected there. Like people might play it, and maybe it makes them more money than it ever should have. Like I don't want to call it out because I don't think it's that bad of a game, but let's call Fall Guys out and say they made way more sales probably than they should have.
Yeah.
100%. But a year later, it's gone. Nobody plays it anymore. So it's just I think it proves out in the end. You can still obviously take advantages in the short term, but again, if you're a VR platform, you don't get to necessarily benefit from short-term boosts. Like if your platform is still not viable in the end, you will not come out in the wash. That's my opinion. Like I just don't think you'll work out eventually. And again, in 2022. People aren't afraid or they're like, oh, it's a big company. I can't call them out for being fraudulent. Like that's not like the thing that people worry about anymore. Like the hardest thing for me is when I go to Amazon to buy something and there's like 900 5-star reviews and I'm like, okay, that seems pretty solid. But then there's a few 1-star reviews that are like, didn't work for me and here's why. And you're like, that's pretty legitimate as well. Like and stuff. So there's this big conundrum kind of thing because whether I want objective opinion, or not objective opinion, that doesn't make any sense, but I want objective feedback on this product, and it just doesn't exist. It's just not possible to get it. There's just too many perspectives, too many people that it works for and doesn't work for all the time, it feels like. So whatever product we're talking about. So I don't know, it's like people will defend certain products, as you know, Bumpy, till the day they die, that you think, why? Like, why would you die on the hill for this thing? It's just so weird. But they're like, I don't want to do anything else. They get obsessed with it. People people get into things, people get obsessed with things, and then 12 years later, we're having more Dead by Daylight killers and stuff. So just things happen, Bumpy. You know what I mean? Like in just that way. Like you're like, oh my gosh.
I do occasionally watch, periodically, a few channels that do VR games and whatnot. And about maybe a year ago, there was quite a bit of movement. There was like, hey, this game came out, and there was like new videos coming out all the time. I don't know if the person got busy, but like it's just been dead for like the last 6 months. Like maybe 2 videos in 6 months. I don't know what's going on. So I felt like VR was really taking a nosedive. Like I feel like you're thinking it's the golden era or the golden age where it's going to start to boom. I feel like we're not there yet still. I feel like we're getting closer. Things are moving that way. There are some AAA successes, some companies that are putting money behind it and making really high quality games. There's better hardware coming out and more options. Like we're almost there, but I still don't think we're quite to that point.
Yeah. It's when I hear conversations organically in my real life about people talking about VR, or even just like people I actually follow, that I'll feel like it's more mainstream. Because like at this point, I feel like the only person that's telling me that the metaverse is doing great is Facebook. So
yeah, like
once like someone's grandma is on it, then I'll believe it a little more.
Well, like let me walk back the golden age a little bit and just say that it's a similar kind of situation that we're seeing. Okay, so the newsletter, the Game Discover co-newsletter, the reason why people follow it is not to see when the trend hits like in a really viral way, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get ahead of this, right? And so right now what we're seeing is that the door may be open to said golden age. It's not necessarily confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. There's too little data, but we do from October, wherever the Oculus or the Quest 2 came out, and the Metastore was rebranded or whatever, till now, we're seeing, like a huge spike. And so what that says to us, just like TikTok to me is not the golden age of social media by any stretch of the imagination. However, the getting's really good on it right now.
Until copyrights come, it'll be gone in a week.
Exactly. So, or they sell their company or they go public, or whatever. Like TikTok, the way it works as far as how we as the indie developer, this is not a referendum on TikTok as a general platform, but for me as an indie developer, right now I'm using TikTok because it's giving me more exposure than any other social media platform with the same amount of work that I would put in on across the board, right? So I just have to make a video that's within the format of TikTok's like kind of best practices, and I can get 10,000 plus views on that. As long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, that happens almost like I would say frequently, like every third or fourth video, we're seeing that now with the Vertigo Gaming site. As Bumpy points out, that's not going to last forever. I don't know if this is going to last forever. However, like the time is now if you're going to take advantage of it, probably. For sure it's now. Later, maybe, but we don't know. Like, we don't know if it's still going to be, the advantage is going to stay there. And there's a lot of examples over the last decade and even further back, but like the last 15 years, we'll say, of this is the time to get on this thing, platform, trend, whatever. And if you don't get to it in time, then you're going to be writing a disappointing post-mortem, like about how your game did not sell that well and how, the trend kind of came in. I had a friend who worked on a rhythm game with the Guitar Hero guitar as the main, input device. And he just took too long to release it, and nobody used those anymore. And it just didn't sell that well at all. And it was just like, if that game came out at the height of when everybody was using those controllers as input, not everybody, of course, but people that were into that kind of Guitar Hero Rock Band era, like were just more actively using them, then he probably would have seen way better sales. But because those had been collecting dust in the closet for 3 years, there was a major, major issue.
All right. Well, we're coming up on an hour. Did we have any closing thoughts? Or this turned into an interesting discussion about where it's all headed. And the answer is we mostly don't know yet. But it's
for sure. There's just signals right now. There's like signs, and there's like, and it's like one of those signs to me as someone who's attuned to trying to make money for a company. It's like, let's do this now. If you have something that you can do now, if you don't, obviously you're just trying to not rush, but get that ready to go before the ship sails, so to speak. That's how I'm always thinking, right? It's like it looks like right now, if I can release a VR game via the Metastore with Quest 2, that is blowing everything else out of the water currently with data that we're seeing over the last several months. That includes Steam VR and all that kind of stuff, which, as reported and as sort of anecdotally sort of mentioned here, doesn't seem to be really advancing. Valve has some things in the pipeline for it. I know that Gabe Newell recently had like a series of, he just kind of opened it up for a series of interviews that have come out on various websites, and VR is mentioned in there a little bit. I can't remember exactly what it is, but maybe that's something we can talk about at another time. But yeah, it's as you guys point out, as TD mentioned, it's not really clear where it's going right now, but it definitely seems like the standalone devices is a big breakthrough to me. I think that will make a difference to having more people trying it, like that they don't have to hook it up to their PC, that kind of stuff. Maybe it allows them to play in different spaces that they normally couldn't play. As your report, or as King's report from via Bumpy pointed out, a lot of it is about being hooked up to a PC in a room that just doesn't offer enough space to do what you need to do. So I wonder if that makes a difference as well. But time will tell.
So what I think is going to catapult, and again, could be completely wrong. Right now, it seems like VR is mostly going, these are video games. Let's convert them into VR video games. I'm waiting for them to go, this is VR. What can we only do in VR that we can't do in a computer game, and this and that? And when they get that thing right and they figure out, I can make a game that you can only play in VR and only experience it there, and there's no other way to do it. Like Beat Saber's kind of in that direction, because what else would you do? It's a rhythm game, sure, but I mean, it's you have to do the whole body movement and all that stuff. When they figure that out, I think that's and like a big company gets behind that, starts pushing, I think that's going to be when VR starts to make its strides toward where it needs to be, and people are going to be like, I have to have this. This is the new thing. Because we've been waiting for that for years, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah. And my 2 cents on that is that that's what the indie spirit is about, is not jumping on a platform just to make more money, but because you're like, oh, we could make something truly unique via this platform. And so I do believe that a lot of smaller studios and indies are out there making those attempts, but they're running into technological hurdles, financial hurdles, and other things of that sort. And so that's one other reason why we haven't arrived there. Bumpy pointed out,
and that's why
bigger companies need to invest.
Yeah,
bigger companies need to invest in the more kind of avant-garde ideas that may work. It's like, as you think about it, some concepts may only work once, like as like a single playthrough, or others would be much more replayable. Obviously, people always want to push for the replayable thing in the market because that's the thing that sustains, makes more money, etc. But you can't lose the art in that process, because there's a lot of like good creative stuff that you would never experience if you said everything has to adhere to this. So that's you're really hoping that some of these bigger companies will be kind of open to those creative, potentially even outlandish experiences that like otherwise that they just don't see, selling X amount of copies and stuff. But you're like, but this is a really cool concept that could breed more ideas, could bring more developers and just brilliant minds over to this area to invest into and to grow. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens, or if it just kind of continues to stagnate, which it very well could, right? It very well could.
That was the reason behind me saying a big company needs to get behind it, is because it's probably going to take something like a big name where people are going to take notice. And, say you come up with this unique, interesting idea on a platform that not a lot of people are really interested in. It could do okay. It might do well, but it's probably just going to get lost in the shuffle. I mean, a lot of games have come out over the years that are ahead of their time. And then you think if they released 10 years later, 15 years later, they would be, top of their genre, top of their thing. So I'm thinking it's the same thing. That's why, like, I'd love the idea of indie games coming through, or indie developers coming through and making these games, these unique things. I'm just afraid that they'll be ahead of their time. And they won't get the appreciation, and then a big company will swoop in later, steal that idea, run with it, and make it big off of it. I mean, it's just one of those things.
That's a cycle that happens routinely in a lot of spaces and times. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's a little lamentable, but yeah, it's a tough call because there's a bitter sweetness to being able to take a concept and get it out to so many more people. But you're like, that wasn't the person's concept; it was someone else's concept.
Yeah, well, that's also one of the reasons I kind of hope maybe it is Valve that does that, because they are known for going, "Hey, you have an awesome idea. Here, have a company, do the thing." They
as
have
opposed to just taking credit and or absorbing them entirely, that kind of thing. Yeah, definitely.
So, any closing thoughts, ideas, or anything else? A Tiny Disaster?
Nothing from me. I think this is pretty good.
Yeah. The marketing move where Gabe went and ran around and delivered in Seattle, the Steam Decks. That was pretty cool. I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, Missy. That was awesome. All right, I have no idea what we're doing next week. What are we doing next week? Do we know?
We're off next week. I am going to be at GDC.
And then on the 13th, I won't be here, so we're probably off again.
But that's not for... We got some shows in between. We have the 30th and the 6th. So we'll have to roll out the 2 episodes that we'll be doing there on socials here soon once we get them figured out, and then get our notes in order and look forward to those shows once I'm back the week after next.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Thank you for joining us, Missy, and anyone else who's lingering in the background or finds the VOD. Hopefully,
lurkers.
Hopefully, we got something good there. Oh, look, Fuzzy. You could have just waited. You had I'd say Fuzzy Cup finally showed up at the end, but no, you ruined it.
Fix it.
All right. Anyway, guys and gals, that's it. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.